Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us. This training is brought to you by Solaris Energy, Financing a Brighter Future. Nick, if you want to head to the housekeeping items, that'd be great. Thank you. So I'm sure you've heard it a million times this past year, but please just stay muted throughout the entire training. To do so, you can go to the bottom of your screen and click the microphone icon so that it is red and has a slash through it. Getting some more folks. And then for Q&A, so instead of unmuting yourself and asking questions, we're going to ask that you please type your questions in just so we can manage them and keep track. To do so, you can go to the activities button, which is in the bottom right corner. It looks like 3 little shapes. You're welcome to click on it now if you want to practice. And then it's just the third section down. It'll say Q&A. If you click into that, you can see a button that says Ask a Question. So you can ask at any point throughout the entire training, but we will only be answering them at the end. There's also a really cool option that you can see other people's questions. And if you see something similar to what you were going to ask or really like a question, you can upvote it. And that's really how we'll be deciding which questions get asked first will be the most popular ones. So certainly use that tool. And then in that same activities icon, you'll also see polls. We are going to launch a poll in a little bit here. It should automatically pop up on your screen, but if for whatever reason it doesn't show up, you can always go over to that activities button and click on polls, and you'll be able to see it there. Google does allow you to manage Q&A as well as launch your own poll as an audience member, but please refrain from doing so and just let us manage the Q&A and launch the polls. And if you could just respond and ask questions, that would be awesome. There's also a chat button. If you type in a question there, we will not see it. We're only going to see anything that goes through the Q&A. So please keep all questions in the Q&A so that we can manage them. And we are recording this webinar so that you'll be able to watch it at any point later on if you choose to. And let's go ahead and introduce the team. You can head to the next slide. Thanks. I'm Jana West-Tice. I'm our Director of Communications and Corporate Development. But who you will really want to know, get to know as our project team, Hunter and Nick. So I'll let them go ahead and introduce themselves. Go ahead, Hunter.
Thank you, Jana. Yeah, my name is Hunter Edberg. You guys will probably be talking to me when you first bring a project to Solaris. I handle most of all intake on new projects. I'm the first one that has eyes on it, builds a financial model, develops questions, comes up with the due diligence items that we need to really dial in on a quote. And then Nick and I tag team projects from there, come up with different scenarios, different options, and kind of work through the process to get you a PPA quote. And if the project looks like it's viable, then all the way into contracts. And that's generally where I tend to phase out of the project. And our project manager, Nick Francis, would step in at that point. But with that, I'll hand it off to Nick Perugini.
Thanks, Hunter. Thanks, Jenna. Welcome, everyone. This is fantastic. I'm really happy that you're all here. I want to share everything that's in my head to make your life easier in considering PPAs. My name, yes, Nick Perugini. I'm the Vice President and co-owner of Solaris Energy. I have about 13 years in the solar business. First portion of my career in cutting teeth was more on the EPC side of development, initial design, and contracting, but again, representing EPCs. So I think I bring a really good and healthy perspective to, an EPC's views on how working with third-party finance and this sort of thing can get complex. I have currently, I think it's about 160, 170 operational projects across 10 states that I've been involved with. My entire career has been business to business. So the pitches, the people, the decision makers, there's various ways to address them, and we're going to cover some of that too. And again, as Jana said, we're going to leave a lot of time for questions and answers at the end, and we can dive into a whole bunch more. So the agenda, what are we going to cover today? PPA, SSA, well, what are they? Features and benefits. How to obtain a PPA or SSA estimate efficiently for you. That's a big deal. The customer presentation and the pitch. We're not going to write it for you, but we sure want to help you win, because then everybody wins. Then this is funny, EPCs, developers, and investors, oh my, how do you keep everyone happy and get one of these deals done? Then also, Solaris, what are we going to do in the end? We're not just a cash in and run kind of entity. We stay involved and want continuing support and repeat business. And then, of course, questions and answers. As Jana said, get those in the Q&A section. One thing I did want to say is this whole presentation is geared to EPCs. So when I say you, I'm talking to the EPCs. There may be others in the room that are more just on the development side, but I'm really talking to those project originators and the builders mostly. There. And Jenny, you had a couple of things you wanted to say here.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and launch this poll. This will really give us a good idea of who's in the room and how familiar you all are with PPAs and SSAs, which will allow us to tailor this training to this audience. So it should just pop up on your screen, but as I mentioned before, if it doesn't, you can go down to the activities and you can find polls as well as the Q&A there where you could submit questions. All right, and while that is running, I'm going to have Nick go over some features and benefits of PPAs and SSAs, and then we'll loop back for the results.
Thanks, Jana. There's a lot of attributes to both. First of all, this is what is a PPA or an SSA? Power Purchase Agreement, and often synonymous, Solar Services Agreement. I use the two fairly interchangeable. By definition, that is the document that gets signed between the customer / host / off-taker and the system owner. This is a great place to jump in and say, I don't know why, but in our industry, we use too many words and acronyms that mean the same damn thing. So sometimes I'll repeat them like in duplicate just to make sure everyone's aware of that. We're talking about the same thing. And I'll dive into a more detail in a minute. But the PPA and the SSA, they're decades-old proven energy financing structures. They may have been newer to solar in the early 2000s. However, utilities have been using that methodology to generate, sell, transmit, distribute energy for decades. It tends to be the safest option, in my opinion, of going solar for the host and off-taker. And I think with the right word usage and telling the truth, most of them will see it that way too. It's usually the lowest cost of entry for a commercial scale solar. It's for a number of reasons. It's utilized by, again, municipalities, nonprofits, corporations, etc. That's the other beauty of the PPA and SSA. It's not limited to one entity or another, particularly in regards to tax benefit utilization. You usually require little or no money up front, and there's no operational risk for that customer. Let me hover on the word customer for a second. Kind of by definition, a customer is the person that's paying someone else. In the EPC, which I also like to call builder because most of the rest of the world doesn't know what an EPC is or what that stands for, but they generally can wrap their head around who a builder is. For them, they're originating an original face on the deal and meeting that building or business owner, and they would see them as their customer. And I kind of would too. But in the end, an owner like us, an investor, is going to be the one that's actually paying the EPC. So I will name them when I'm speaking so as not to confuse who's the customer in various scenarios. One of the biggest benefits, and this is what you hear the most on PPAs and SSAs, there should be immediate customer savings, which will grow over time. And I like this little table. And again, Janice said we have this recorded. We'll probably post it on our website, and you can reference some of these things later on. A little bit of a comparison here on buying versus leasing versus PPAs. Upfront capital. Obviously, if you're we called it building or business owner is going to buy it, they're going to need a loan, but they're always going to need some cash in. Leasing, sometimes they can do it with no money down. Usually it's going to require some cash. In ours, in the SSA and PPA, we try and model them all with no down payment or prepayment from the host customer. However, sometimes it's beneficial. Hunter work those out with you. Performance risk. If they own it or they lease it, performance risk is generally on them. That leases come pay hell or high water. With the solar PPA or an SSA, if our solar array doesn't generate, then that customer doesn't pay, because that's the product we're delivering is kilowatt hours. Do they need any system expertise? If they own it, yeah, they're kind of wanting to keep track of it, make sure it's operating right. They could lose track. I see that happen. Taking it all the way over, though, if it's on us, we're watching it every day. We get alerts when the system goes down or is poorly performing. We'll dispatch for service. I'll talk about that some more. That actually flows into the next one about maintenance requirements. If they own it, they're going to have to take care of it. If we own it and they're just buying the energy, we take care of it. And is it purchase required? Well, by definition, for a lease or a purchase, or a cash purchase, yes. But with a PPA, no, they're not required to. They'll have options to, or you can just run out the full term. I mentioned already that it kind of works for all entity types. Let's take a municipality, for example. A municipality is a non-taxable entity. Whether it's the water treatment plant, the fire station, city hall, or something like that. They rarely have the budget to go solar, and they can't utilize the investment tax credit. They can't use a depreciation tax shield. But with a PPA or an SSA and a third-party investor owner like ourselves or our investors, they can. That gets monetized. That gets put into the deal. That drives down their starting PPA rate. The construction cost is all on us. We're building it. And again, we're managing the EPC contract and the relationship with you, the builder, EPC, and how that works. However, you can remain the face in the deal, and we're sort of behind the scenes, or your wingman, or we can go in side by side with you. We tailor that relationship how you see fit or how you need it. We have some EPC partners that pretty much run the show, and we're just kind of like the bank behind the scenes, and that's okay. We do end up talking with those host customers and getting the details worked out, but the main face is that originator, usually a salesperson or a development manager. In other cases, we're going in side by side with you on your presentation. We're there to answer questions, to make that customer comfortable, and for lack of better words, to help you sell it. The O&M is on us, so operations and maintenance. We typically try to hire back you, the builder, for a contracted operations and maintenance schedule. Sometimes that's one visit a year, sometimes it's two. We'll monitor the system. So when I talk O&M, we talk O&M, we're specifically talking about the physical on-site work. The visit, checkup, random torque settings, some random string tests, and that sort of thing. We wouldn't put the daily monitoring or the invoicing and billing and that sort of thing on you. That's part of what we do. By definition, we call that asset management. And we do that for almost all of our investors. Insurance, another question that comes up. Who pays for the insurance? Is it going to raise the customer's insurance rates? No, we have to insure it. We own it. And all those costs, and hopefully no claims, but they're on us. Quick note on insurance. If you're on a coastal region in a hurricane zone and or an earthquake region, or now forest and wildfire regions, those costs are going up. That's our job, to figure out what those are going to be and properly estimate those with our carriers so that we're providing accurate numbers to the end user. Another big one is the purchase options. So the countersigner with us of the PPA or SSA is the off-taker. They will have options to purchase or terminate that contract, typically starting after year 6, and then on every anniversary thereafter in our models. You've heard the term recapture. The recapture of the investment tax credit is kind of catastrophic. No one wants to go there. That's why these purchase options start after year 6. Something can go really wrong and they need to terminate prior to that. It's not going to be fun. It's going to be pretty painful for everyone involved. So that's a big one. And we do have customers that have bought out. Buyout is another term that's used officially, and it's not proper. Terminate is the better word for the IRS and what's in the contracts. But other customers have bought out at year 10. Some aim to prior to that. One way to look at it is if they have a decent amount of savings through this, they bank their savings, they have hopefully enough money, maybe not to buy out the whole thing, but to put that down and then get a small loan themselves. Another benefit is they'll have operational expensive savings. So, the cost of electricity, while it's kind of like the only things you can't avoid is death and taxes. Well, no, for a business, you can't avoid paying your electric bill either. So they're stuck with it. And if we can get that reduced by a meaningful amount, that should be something they consider. It can be a challenge to overcome that with the customer because it's not in their day-to-day mind. That's something they're just used to living with and paying that bill. And hopefully the savings we can provide and or the other intangible benefits that come with going solar, that they'll see those as sufficient to do a deal. I like to talk about property enhancements too. Now, if it's on a roof and no one can see it, how much of a property enhancement is that? Well, it's kind of monetizing, utilizing roof space that right now is doing nothing except for keeping the rain and sun out. Real estate agents would look at that as leasable square feet that's unused. So these are all kind of little pitches and one-liners you can use to help that customer sort of understand. If it's a ground mount, maybe the visibility of that helps them gain more customers, reach their carbon reduction goals too. And then carports become kind of a no-brainer in the markets where they can work well financially. It's not only visible, it's a benefit either to the employees or the customers. If you're in the Southwest, parking in the shade is huge. And maybe if you're in New England with you parking out of the snow, that can be a benefit too. So something else we can consider, and we've done all of the above.
Hey, Nick, before you move on, I'm just going to quickly end the poll and share the results.
Okay.
So it looks like about half of our folks have done a few third-party PPA finance projects here and there. And then we've got a couple of folks on the yes mini and a couple of folks on the none but we're interested side. So hopefully that can help. Yeah.
So that's a wide spectrum right there. For those with the experience, some of this may be a little redundant, and it's probably more about meeting the Solaris team. And for those new, I think this will be very, very beneficial. And for those who've done a few, maybe it's a little bit of both. It's going to fortify your information knowledge now and also tell you a little about, the benefits of working with Solaris Energy. One of which is, obtaining your estimates efficiently. When I was doing my first PPAs more than several years ago, it would take 3+ weeks. It was like pulling teeth. I was so excited to have something to offer a customer. Like, this is fantastic. You can put in no money, you can pay as you go, and you save money from day one. It's kind of a no-brainer. And then I try and get my PPA estimates, and working with outside investors, this is when I worked for a different firm. It would just take forever. The deal would get cold, customer would lose interest. You got to strike when the iron's hot. We kind of all know that. There's a decent amount of information we need to be accurate for you. We can swag stuff all the time. If you haven't heard that term, a scientific wild ass guess, kind of a funny one. I always like that one. The more info we have, the more accurate we can be. This is kind of like the big four. Hopefully you're talking to that off-taker and you've collected at least one recent electric bill, preferably 12 months. What's our target here, right? We want to know what the target is. That's not going to change how we price it, but it's going to tell both you and us how viable is this deal off the bat. How much time and effort should we really put in? To exaggerate for effect, if customer is paying 30 cents per kilowatt hour, everybody's going to be able to make that work. I can almost guarantee it. However, on the other side of the scale, if they're paying 2 cents per kilowatt hour, how the heck are we going to make that work without some other sizable, revenue injection to the deal? So that's what's there, and that's the energy only rate. So that's important. Utilities have demand charges on the bill, lots of riders, potentially taxes and other fees. Which ones add up and are calculated specifically on kilowatt hours? Because think about it, we're going to reduce kilowatt hours. So that means in most markets, in most utilities, we should reduce all charges that the utility hits them with associated to kilowatt hours. We can't guarantee demand savings reductions. So we'll leave those as icing on the cake for the host. I am seeing more and more models that factor in some savings there, kind of on a statistical basis, but that depends on their usage and load profile, so it could vary. Moving on, system size. Of course, we need to know how big the system size. We're still in the solar industry and we're still using DC system size, so that's what we'll continue. I can't wait till we just switch to AC size and talk with the utilities and everyone else in AC, because that's what everyone else in the world uses. However, DC system size is important because lots of other costs are factored based on that size, behind the scenes costs too. We'll need to know your turnkey EPC price. Now, turnkey is an important feature there. It can't exclude stuff. It can't include sales taxes that'll be passed through later. We and our investors need to know what the whole nut is going to cost. It's the only way we can give you accuracy. If you have to estimate some pieces, cost of permits and things like that, fine, do so. Flag it. Say, this is part as an estimate. We're estimating it's this. But there'll be actuals kind of later on. We can probably work together on some of that. And then annual production, obviously, that's huge. High-producing south-facing arrays are more easily financeable than your east and west. Exaggerate for effect. Let's say someone, no one we know, but installs a solar array facing north instead of facing south on a similar roof. it's going to cost the same for you guys to install it. All the costs of permitting, everything else is going to cost the same. However, the production is going to be massively sacrificed, and thereby the revenue, what the customer pays to the investors to recoup the investment, is going to be greatly reduced, and it's not going to pencil. So if you have marginal projects, we'll look at them. Of course we will. But we're going to provide some feedback. It also sort of applies inherently here that if the EPC price is really expensive, the most high-end modules and the most high-end inverters, and call it the Lamborghini of solar arrays, if you like those, as long as the production number goes up commensurately, it might carry it, but I find a lot of times it doesn't. If you can get a moderately priced array with that reliability that we all want at a reasonable price and decent production, for finance reasons, that might pencil better. We can discuss this more with you anytime. And we're happy to kind of work through details, because all of you may have choices in your product selection. Probably a good point on that, before I move to the next one, is we don't have a preferred vendor list for equipment. Most of your approved UL, CEC approved equipment is going to be fine. We have a short kind of mental list of those that are not desirable, and kind of we can always talk about those. So we're still on the getting the estimate kind of phase here, and each time this will rehash deeper. I'll go through this a little quick. A few slides down will be the website, and you can grab this, download it. We can send it to you. An important feature is, while in a perfect world everyone would fill one of these out for us, we don't expect that. We're trying to make things efficient, not make work. If you have a different form that provides the majority of this information already, that's probably fine. But put yourself in our shoes. Don't send us a whole slew of documents where we have to hunt for every piece of information. That's going to slow us down, or we're going to have to fudge on some accuracy somewhere. So the big things we need, today's date's nice to know when we started. If there's an estimate needed by date, maybe there's a deadline on an RFP, let us know, be clear about that. What's your project deadline, if there is one? Hey, maybe the project has to be done by the end of the year because otherwise they lose out on a $100,000 grant. Let us know. That's important. Timing is always going to be important. And we will like high velocity projects that can get contracted, built quick, and everything. That will be fantastic. Again, we already kind of covered that, the reason for the deadline. If we haven't worked together before, always nice to fill out, you, the originator. I'm assuming that you're the EPC and the originator here. Fill it out so we get you in our database and we've got the right emails and the right company name and all that, with the assumption that we will get to contract and those contracts will get filled out right the first time. Pretty standard stuff there. Your relation to the project. How did you land this? Did it come to you? Are you the builder? Are you just a developer and you're looking for an EPC? Maybe you're a supplier trying to connect some dots for some people. You maybe like a referral reward. We can do all those things as long as we know. This part gets important. Who's that? Again, customer, host, off-taker, right? 3 words for almost the same thing. Their full business name, like the real business name. Joe's Muffler Shop might be business name under Joe and Billy's Gold-Plated Mufflers Incorporated. We need that full name because we have to look them up. We have to do some homework on them. Their address, of course. And by the way, if you're not comfortable sharing all of this stuff right off the bat, we'll sign an NDA. Our non-disclosure agreement has non-circumvention clauses in it. We're not here to take your deals. We don't want to source deals. We want EPCs and developers to be sourcing deals and bringing them to us for financing. So While there's little concern about it, we can document it so there's legal backup with all that. Piece of cake, and we do it all the time. City, state, zip, county. Sometimes county is important for property taxes. You wouldn't think that's as important, but we have to look up property taxes or business personal property taxes on the equipment. If they exist in that particular market, those are going to be on us. We're going to need to factor those in to be able to provide that accurate PPA estimate for you. Permitting jurisdiction, usually assume that you know that. Just want to check that there's nothing weird here in overlays of AHJ requirements. The big one, you've all heard this one before. Do they own the building or are they leasing it? We can do tenant landlord scenarios for the tenant. The landlord's going to need to be involved. They're going to need to approve it. We're going to need to see those leases later on as we get into deeper due diligence and documents. This is an easy one. Do they have loans on their building and their site? That's going to go into the credit review. If their business is worth $1 million and they have $5 million worth of loans, that's, I'm exaggerating for effect, but there's going to be some cause for concern on the credit side of things. And credit is critical these days. It's only gotten worse post-COVID or in the middle of COVID. Are they credit rated? We work with entities that are credit rated, what we call investment grade, and plenty that are not. It's not critical, but it's an easy yes or no question to find out. We have a credit form that's really easy for them to fill out. The earlier, the better. But generally, what sort of happens kind of organically, again, we try and work with our partners in a friendly manner, not like some institutional bank that forces you through flaming hoops. But if we do an initial estimate and you provide that to the customer and they seem interested, or like they're likely to say yes, they want a handshake, but they kind of haven't handshake yes on it, let's do a credit form. Let's just get all those ducks in a row now. That'll take away any apprehension on both sides. The site info. Here's where we can give it the affectionate name, Joe's Mufflers. And then when we're all talking, we'll know we're talking about the same thing, which is different from that business name sometimes. Probably a lot of this is the same in most cases, but if it's different, let us know about the site info. Which utility are they with? All this you're going to pull from the bills. You already had at least one copy of one recent bill. You should have that and have done the math on the kilowatt hour rate. We can help with that sort of thing, but think about it that we want to maintain our lane, that we're the experts in PPA and SSA financing, development, construction, financing, and also owner and operating. We're not going to be able to do bill breakdowns and load analysis and cost breakdowns for hundreds of customers across the country, across dozens or hundreds of utilities. I can guide you, Hunter can guide you some, but we won't be able to do them for you. We kind of do expect you to feed us that number. How much are they paying per kilowatt hour now? And this one's a hard one to put our fingers on often, maybe for all of us. What's the annual escalation expected within that utility? These help us establish the target that we need to beat. There's no reason for us to give you a proposal back that is higher than their current cost of energy and with an escalator, if any, that's higher than what their utility's supposed to do, because the customer won't like that. It's going to be hard to get them to say yes. There's very few of those that end up getting contracted. In reality, I've only seen a couple. And then maybe there's other areas we can massage. We can talk about equipment. We can talk about production. We could talk about some cost cutting somewhere. Can we make it work? So all important. System info, this is kind of a no-brainer. Tell us what you're planning to install or your initial design is. We don't need engineered drawings, but we do need a rough layout. We have to validate production for ourselves and for the investors. just kind of keep everyone honest. If we notice discrepancies, we'll let you know. We'll talk through them. Type of system, system size, first year production. You can include if you use a 0.5 standard degradation, if you use something different for different reasons, let us know. Expected EPC costs, dollars per kilowatt DC. This is another one. Probably should have been in a different place, but is the host up for contributing any cash towards a prepayment, if any? Would they even consider that? Here's a quick way to talk about that one. If it's a zero down, think about a loan or buying a car. Let's say you're buying a car. If you're buying a car and you want to get into that car without putting any money down, your payment's going to be higher. If you're buying that same car and you could put 50% down, your payment's going to be lower. It's not exactly the same with the PPA and SSA, but the results are similar. So it's good to ask the question, would they entertain? We're not requiring it, not asking for it, but would they entertain it? Sometimes a small prepayment, 2, 3, maybe 5% of the EPC price goes a long way to buying down that EPC price. This is about production. When do you think you could start in a perfect world? And if you had to tell me, we can start construction 3 months after contract, because it's hard to tell how long it's going to take us to get from where we are now to contract, that's fine. We'll do an estimate there. If it's a ground mount in a greenfield, we don't see as many. We do some of these. What's the land or roof lease requirement? What do they want? Do they have an expectation of how many years for that? If you know property taxes, please tell us. If you've had experience with it before, it'll just save us time and speed us up. What's your operations and maintenance cost for an annual visit on this site that you're proposing? That's a good one. Doesn't need to be bullseye in the middle, but it needs to be a defensible number. And does the project have any loans already? This is more about when we do an acquisition of a project that's in development. Almost done here. Incomes. SRECs, ZRECs, just plain old RECs, whatever the market wants to call them. How much are they? How much can we expect the investor, owner of that array, to get out of those? You're the market expert locally, and we need your guidance. We'll validate, but every utility, every city, county, state is different. Help us help you by feeding us that information to the best of your ability. If you're not sure, say so. We'll figure it out together. What's the term length there? Is there some other kind of performance-based incentive? What's the term of that one? Are there any other rebates or incentives? Tends to be less these days. Don't worry about ITC and depreciation, or sometimes called MACRs. We'll take care of that part. Tell us what the target is. If there's a target PPA rate, maybe you're coming in second, so you already talked to some other EPC or salesperson, and that person promised them 8 cents, and you want to hit 7.9. Tell us. We'll try and do it. We'll try and figure it out together. If they have a PPA term desired, longer is better for us, investors, owners. So the longer that PPA, we can go out 30 years. Used to be 20 was typical, but we can nowadays mostly we do 25, but they can go out 30. We talked about the escalator already. Talked about electric bills, preliminary layout. If you already gave the proposal to a customer kind of for a cash deal, that probably has all the information on it that we need, so share that with us. Again, we can sign that non-disclosure agreement and non-compete, so you can feel comfortable that's staying private with us. If you have any permitting or interconnection paperwork underway, share that with us early on. if this development has gotten further along. We like to talk early and then commit when everyone has high confidence. Again, you can download this form on our website, solarisenergy.com. You'll see I think there's a page for more information, but contact financing for solar with dashes in between. You can also email Hunter or myself, and we'll send you the form in a fillable PDF. There's nothing private about this one. Share it as needed. Customer presentation, kind of end the pitch. My opinion, you should always lead with financing. We're talking about systems that are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. If you throw $1 million capital expense in front of most small to mid-sized business owners, their eyes are going to glaze over and say, what? You want me to pay $1 million for this thing to save, maybe several or $10,000 a year? You're crazy. You're going to slam the door in your face. But if you lead with the financing, what are the payments? Hey, the payments are less than what you're paying for electricity now. Okay, you gained a little bit of attention. Let's talk. Don't scare them away. That's my opinion. It's your business. You know the customer. You have to run it as you see fit. That's where I've had the most success. I'll still provide those options. We, in the past, I should say my former life, I always provided those options with, a PPA, a loan. Leases, sometimes they sort of fallen out of fashion in many regards, and they need the highest grade credit, mostly, I find. And then a cash deal. The customer had the 3 scenarios or more to look at and let them pick, and then we'll drill down and dial in. You could say, by saying that, I'm sort of shooting myself or Solaris Energy in the foot, but we want happy customers, and we want to see solar get built around the country to massive extent. The more that gets built, that benefits all of us. I'm happy to lose a deal to a customer that can take the tax credit themselves and just buys it and goes solar. I would pat them on the back and say congrats. We do need accurate facts in the materials. If you're not sure of something, or it's an estimate or a prediction or a forecast, please say so. Changing those things later after conversations are really deep can be tough. It kind of goes without saying, don't misrepresent to the customer, under promise and over deliver. However, when we're talking about production, and you're telling us the production expectation, tell us what a real world scenario you would expect. What if you own this array? How much energy would you expect it to produce? You can under promise to the customer, but don't under promise when you're talking or giving us a number, because you're just handicapping yourself. We need a defensible, this is what the real production should be in the first year. And to that customer, describe the process. It's not hard. They're going to work with you, work through some design. You're going to put a price tag. You'll interface with us. We'll provide that feedback of the PPA estimate for them. You can present it to them. If they like it, then we'll collect that credit information. Again, we'll send you that credit form. That's easy. And then we'll work through a PPA contract. We use a PPA contract that's built dominantly on the SIA 2.0 version, though we have adapted that to be an SSA. And I'll talk a little bit more. Well, I'll cover it now. We use an SSA, a solar services agreement, to be more versatile in more markets. PPA, power purchase agreements, by definition, are not allowed in some utilities and some states. The SSA is not necessarily allowed in every single state and every single utility, but it tends to be more versatile. What's the difference? The difference is mostly legalese. The lawyers draft the clauses so they don't raise the red flags to break existing laws, rules, or regulations. I use the term synonymously. The two documents are extremely similar. The roles and responsibilities of the parties are pretty much the same. So it's more, in my opinion, it's more semantics. And then, from our perspective, we get to use one document in as many places as we can instead of having two different documents that are constantly evolving across different markets. Last bullet point here. And it kind of goes without saying to you guys too. Anyone who has had, the sales experience of getting told no because they were talking to the wrong person knows you need an internal champion for these kind of deals. You've got to have someone that really wants to do this and is going to potentially, if you're not talking to, the CEO and CFO, that's going to drag the CEO and CFO along, or someone that they listen to. The decision, the first decision may be about one kind of green, but it's a different kind of green that makes the final decision. We may have hit on some of these already, some frequently asked questions and answers from the customers, right? What might you hear from them? What responsibility do they have after it's built? Well, they got to pay their bill. We're going to send an electric bill for the solar energy produced, just like the utility does before. As you may realize, they're still connected to the grid, so they're still going to get a bill from the utility for any remainder that we didn't produce with solar and offset. You'll often get the questions, well, what happens if the solar goes down at night? Am I not going to have power? I think most of you know those answers. We can walk through those too. It's a net metered system. Majority of our systems are net metered. We do some virtually net metered and some kind of greenfield and community solar, but most of our work is on-site, distributed generation, behind the meter. Again, these all mean the same thing to me, but in the, call it 100 kilowatts to several megawatt range. Those are our sweet spots. Average project for us runs around 350 to 400 kilowatts. What else are they responsible for?
Hey, Nick, I just wanted to give you a heads up. I know you can probably keep going for another hour or two, but we got about 10 minutes till we get the Q&A section. I just wanted to give everyone a reminder. I've only seen a couple questions pop in so far. At the bottom right corner of your screen, you'll see a little section for activities. It's a little circle, square, triangle. And if you click that, it'll bring you up to a little menu, and there's a Q&A section. So feel free to get your questions in there in the next few minutes, and we'll get to them here after 11.
Thanks, Hunter. And he's right. I could talk about this stuff for hours and hours. We're going to make ourselves available afterwards. Happy to do one-on-ones with anyone that wants to and walk through more detail. So let me see if I can power through the rest and stay on schedule, which I'm not always good at. What else does a host have to what's their responsibility? Well, if they have issues that they know of on the site that happen, we're not there. It's their building. Let us know. They get pounded by a hailstorm. They're not sure about the solar. Hey, guys, we had a huge hailstorm last night. Or if it's a carport and, hey, we got in this morning and it looks like someone crashed into the carport. Let us know, right? There's their responsibility because they're. Otherwise, just providing site access. And we need to provide you the legal right to access to service when necessary and or do checkups. The contract, the PPA itself, has language that allows for notice. We would give them notice. Usually it's 2 business days, unless there's a case of emergency. When can the off-taker, quote, buy out and how much? Kind of covered this already. There are real options to purchase the system, start at the end of year 6. It's the anniversary of that. And though we can provide an estimated termination value table to give them the idea of what it could cost, in the end, if there's any questions on that or disagreement, it will go to a third-party independent appraiser who will determine fair market value. I believe our numbers should be pretty close, and then that ruling is final for both parties. Whose insurance? We kind of mentioned this one. It's our insurance as long as we own the system. We own the equipment and therefore, hold the insurance on them. Again, property taxes sort of aligns with that same school of thought too. What will you see from a monitoring perspective? We give all of our customers free access to web accessible monitoring. Whatever monitoring system we have, they'll have good viewing capability to it also. So they can see how much the system produced over the day, the week, the month, the year. They can work with their IT department to get it ported and plugged into their website, however they want to brag about it. Now, what does the off-taker customer need to provide upfront? We will need the full financial package from them. This is going to be the last 3 years of tax returns, their business formation documents, incorporations and the like. If they have loans, we'll need to see those loan documents. Think about it. If they were getting a loan for, I don't know, let's call it $3 million, the bank is going to ask for all these things. Well, we're providing a $3 million system to them and counting on them to pay their electric bill. It's the same similar review process. We'll need their cooperation and timely responses as we're working through the contracts, which with an NDA, we can circulate a draft version unpopulated for them. How do we all work together? EPCs, developers, investors. Oh my. I like this one. This is a deal structure. This is nice and simple. Jana put this together in my pat on the back for her. I've seen multiple scenarios of these kind of flow charts that are just way too complex. We have that customer off-taker host. We have you, the EPC. You have that relationship with them. We don't yet. As you bring us in for the PPA contract, we will form a single purpose entity, an LLC, for the ownership of that project. That entity, affectively, affectionately, we always say us, will be the signer of that PPA contract. At the same time, we're working with you, the EPC and builder, to sign that EPC contract. So you're getting paid through the EPC contract, and once it's all done and built, we're getting paid by the PPA contractor, by the PPA contract from the off-taker through that special purpose entity, which owns the solar array. This one, I would say, screenshot it. Some of the key, yes.
Were other folks able to see that slide? I just got a note in the chat that someone was not able to. Can other people give me a thumbs up if they saw that slide? Or yeah, awesome. Okay. All right, Sean. We'll be sending this out in PDF form, so we'll be able to show it to you.
Thanks, Jenna. One of the things many EPCs will be afraid of with working with the third-party investor owner like ourselves is, what kind of craziness you're going to throw at us in the EPC contract and expect us to do. The key ones and the important ones that are probably important for everybody is what's our milestone payment schedule. Well, we have a standard milestone payment schedule in our contract template. We can work with you on when those payments are. We're not hard set with that. However, the goal here is that neither one of us is upside down or at risk at any point. So as long as that's the goal, the known goal for both of us, we can work with you on milestones. What's the payment terms? Are you going to take 60 and 90 days to pay us after we send an invoice? No. We try and pay as fast as possible. These days, the typical term is 30 days, and we are prompt. I have and used to in the past push those faster, But when we have other banks and lawyers involved, well, sometimes I couldn't keep my word because other people screwed it up. So we'll put 30-day terms, and if we have the ability to pay earlier and everyone's happy, we will. What kind of insurance requirements? We can send those to you. I'm not going to rattle through all the requirements, but there will be a construction rider requirement and an umbrella policy requirement. Think about the size of the project as a whole and what's the risk level. It's going to need to be insured. Roof warranties, another one. So we don't expect you to do the work and carry a roof warranty, but we do expect that you don't void any warranty that may be on that roof now. So the typical process is most EPCs, and some of you may have seen this before, is you find out, hopefully from the building owner, or maybe from a label on the material, who's the manufacturer of that material on that roof. Do they still hold a warranty on it? Contact them. They'll do a pre and post work inspection. Pre-inspection will be like, hey, this roof's in good shape except for that corner. It's got some holes we're going to need to fix, but it was there before you guys started solar work. And then once it's all done, hey, they did good. They didn't poke any new holes, so we'll reinstate our warranty. Or, hey, looks like you guys ripped this membrane over here. Someone must have dropped a cordless drill. Let's just get this fixed and we'll reinstate that warranty. Monitoring. Also Energy is the preferred platform of most investors today. I have mixed feelings on it sometimes. There are some simpler and cheaper ones, but think about this. That's critical for us. The only way we can prove how much product, kilowatt hours, that we sold to send an invoice to that off-taker is through revenue grade monitoring. Happy to work through details with those. Liquidated damages often end up being a concern. There are some. I won't say there's none. There's a performance test requirement at the when you commission a system. Insulation adjusted, that system, when you're saying, we're this close to being done, that needs to have at least 95% of its expected nameplate capacity come out. That's insulation adjusted. So that sounds like fair leeway to me. The other damage, it's not real. The lawyers would crucify me if I use the wrong words. It's not necessarily liquidated damages, but it is a penalty. When there's a COD date, expected date in the EPC contract, that is critical. In the beginning, as we're negotiating that contract, you can tell us any day you want. Give yourself 3 months, 6 months of leeway. Don't forget that you gave yourself 6 months. But once we sign on it, that date is important because all of this money is shelled out by our investors, and there's, hoping to start recouping it, to close on loans. There's a whole bunch of obligations and complexities behind the scenes that key off that date. Change orders. Nobody likes change orders. Let's do everything we can to minimize them. If it's a legitimate change order from, an AHJ change or something like that, we just need to know as soon as possible. When you have the slightest inkling that there may be a change order coming, get us on the phone. Let's talk about it. We need to know when and if those are going to happen. In a catastrophic scenario, we could all back out, but we don't want to go too far. I've not experienced that, but contracts have to allow that. If we find that that roof just simply can't support solar, and it's going to cost, $500,000 to refortify that roof, we may not want to do that. Or we're going to have to talk to that host. How are we going to figure this out together? The detailed scope of work is, of course, critical in an EPC contract, and it varies entirely with a type of install. Usually I'll ask that you write that up. We have some templates for each, and we'll provide those. And then you get to kind of customize those. We'll make sure that nothing's missing. We're at time, but we didn't have a ton of questions yet. So I'm just going to get through the last couple of slides and look at those questions. Ongoing support. When it's all done, we're not gone. We're going to want to stay involved. We're going to track our systems. We're going to make sure they're performing right. The systems that we continue to own and our internal investment group continues to own, we're going to monitor those. We're going to be billing. We're going to be doing the contact and customer support. We have an in-house asset manager that handles all of that. There are systems that sometimes go to an external investors, and we'll take a back seat to them at some point. However, Solaris Energy is always here to provide those accurate and efficient estimates. A lot of the things we just talked about, guidance on proposals that if you draft one and you're about to put it in front of a customer and you just like an extra set of eyes on it and, our opinion, we can do that. We can share that. That's just good business working together. We can offer advice on customer interactions along the way. If you tell us, this one person on the board has this hang up and the rest of the board is, is waffling a little bit because of this one other person, is there a way to solve that hang up? I don't know. We've seen enough deals. We might have a solution for it. Never know. But just talk. And if you have multiple people or even just one on your commercial sales team, we can do this sort of thing for your entire sales team. Set those up. A little advanced warning. We could probably go through the same one. We can go through very specifics, walk through a contract. In the end, the person on the sales and development side that has that face-to-face contact with that off-taker is the one that needs to build rapport. We want them to be very confident at doing their job. And that's going to make our life easier too. So we're happy to provide that support. And I think that's about it. Yep.
Only 4 minutes past, Nick. That's pretty dang good.
That's not bad.
Yeah, if you're cool with it, I'll jump right into questions. One
Sure.
Real quick one right off the bat. What is EPC? We never actually did define it. That is an engineering, procurement, and construction firm, which is mostly what all you folks are. You're the ones out there building those projects, and we're the ones financing them. Another pretty quick and simple one. Solaris's minimum kilowatt size for a C&I PPA. This is a bit variable depending on the market, but generally we're about that 100 kW minimum, where third-party financing really seems to start working. And we can look at projects all the way up to 10 megawatts plus. Generally, our kind of niche is in that 200 to 300 kW to a couple megawatts. That's the vast majority of projects that we work on. Nick, a good one for you. I understand that Solaris monetizes the ITC, but do you request payment for the SRECs or other solar rebates offered by utilities, or does the off-taker get those?
Ooh, that's a good question. Most of the time, we're going to take those, and that is the preference. It can be a little 6 of one, a half dozen of the other. If those other revenue streams come to Solaris, then the PPA rate is driven down and starts lower. Counter to that, if they, host for some reason or customer wants to take those RECs or other benefits, maybe they do want the RECs to claim their carbon offset, then the PPA starting rate's going to be a little bit higher. So you can go either way, and we have, but the preference, and I think the best bet for most parties is they come to us.
Another good one here. How much does O&M cost on average? We don't source O&M in-house, and customers have asked what industry standards are. I'd say it's pretty standard that most of I would say it's probably about a 50-50 split, that about half the EPCs that we work with tend to do O&M in-house, and the other half tend to sub that out. So I'll let you handle that one, Nick.
Yeah, we see numbers, that vary quite a bit. It's often a per kilowatt DC, dollars per kilowatt DC is the way we often get those numbers. Small systems is going to generally have a higher number, $6 to $10 per kilowatt. A very large system may be lower. I've seen as low as, $3.50 per kilowatt. A better way to look at it is, in my opinion, is if you have to roll a truck with two, solar techs in it, and how long are they going to be out there? What kind of hourly rate will you need? And then what would that charge be? And then back into that, that price. We can work with it if you just gave us a hard dollar number. That's fine. But it does vary.
Another good one. What works better for PPAs, single axis or fixed tilt? At which size does that switch happen?
Ooh, that's a good question and a moving target. The last time I ran the comparison, it was about 500 kilowatt ground mount. But it's going to depend on where in the country you are. At about a 500 kilowatt system size in areas with pretty strong or decent insulation and irradiance, you start to have this net benefit with trackers at about 500 kilowatts.
On a ground mount, how do you normally see property taxes handled? For instance, do you say the solar array takes up 5% of your property footprint, so we will pay 5% of your tax bill, or am I way off here?
It's not that you're way off. It's that all the jurisdictions are way off. They're all different. In some places it's per the cost of that equipment or replacement value. And again, I'm talking about business personal property taxes, and we can separate that from real estate property taxes. I haven't seen many jurisdictions lately that real estate property taxes can be increased because, solar went on the site. Thank goodness. But I do see a lot of areas where there's some business personal property taxes on the equipment alone that we would be required to pay. And again, it varies. Sometimes it's on the equipment cost replacement. Sometimes it's on energy production. In Colorado, there's kind of a complex spreadsheet to fill out that comes from the state, and we can get a pretty close estimate of what we'll have to pay there. In other areas, Illinois, if I remember correctly, had an exemption, and then another law was passed to undermine some of that exemption, and it's like 3 layers of laws. Thankfully, hey, that's one of the things we have to worry about and not you, but your guidance helps.
Yep, I would definitely agree with that. Now, I will add that there are quite a few states that do have property tax exemptions for solar. That can almost always be found in Desire, that really good resource, depending on which state market you're working in. But yeah, for other states, if they don't have an easy way to calculate it, sometimes we just have to go to the local assessors and we go from there. Another good one. Are there any books or resources that we can read to help inform us and understand the PPA, SSA, and all the different caveats?
If it's in a published book, it's probably too old. However, there are numerous links, and some of my go-to sources are the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Both have, white papers, kind of independent, right? So it's not coming from us or you, that describe the process in thorough detail, and actually more detail on the benefits. Very few customers will make their way all the way through those, but the fact that it exists and there's some, pretty graphs and charts in them will probably be helpful. We have links. I would say reach out, drop us a quick note. Hey, I'd like those links, and we'll send them to you.
Last one in the Q&A for now anyways. On a roof mount, how do you deal with roof maintenance unrelated to solar? For example, host needs to make a simple repair to their roof and a handful of modules need to be moved and then put back a week later. Who pays for this and how is it documented in the PPA?
Good one. So the host is responsible for that, right? We don't own the roof. We didn't own it before. We put something on top of it. The goal is always to put solar on young roofs. We don't want to install on a 20-year-old roof that's going to have to be replaced or is falling apart. That's just kind of asking for trouble. However, these things happen. The host, in the language in the PPA, the host is allowed to do that. They would have to contact us. Because they may have to use the company that we say that still holds warranty on the solar, which might be you if it happens early on. Don't want to void any of the solar warranties either. It can be removed, set aside, potentially stored. Roofers can do their work. Solar can be reinstalled and rewired. Hopefully it's, can avoid any re-permitting or anything like that. Most of the time with a simple repair we can. That would be on the host's dime. A little addition to that is if it's a large section of the array and it's out for a long time, the host is going to be responsible to pay for the energy that would have been delivered, because that failure is no fault of ours, and we would want to deliver the energy, but we couldn't because they kind of wouldn't let us. So it's not a common occurrence, but it can happen, and it's a good question.
And those are all the questions in the Q&A chat right now. Nick, I don't know if you had anything back in the presentation you wanted to cover a little bit more thoroughly, or any questions that come to your mind off the top of your head.
I think we touched a lot of bases here. It's not a complex process, and we want to make it as easy as possible. And we have it, in my opinion, down to a science. However, if you have follow-up questions, I see one hand raised now, which we can do, and just reach out and we'll work through it. That's probably the biggest thing. We are actively seeking partners like yourselves to bring us more projects because our investors are hungry for more. That's kind of the bottom line. Quite literally, in fact, if you had any projects that could finish by the end of this year, which might be a tall order because it's already September, there's a big market for 2021 tax credit desires. Kind of just came out of nowhere. So let's take that question from KZ.
Hey, this is Ken Zabera from Harvest Solar in Michigan. And, I'd like to connect outside of this, but I'm dealing with a scenario with a school where, it relates to the roof question, where essentially the school says, if I have a repair, if I need to make a repair and I need to move these solar panels or whatever, I understand that I understand why it would be the host's cost and the host's responsibility. But they say, well, if that risk and if that unknown cost and risk is out there, then we're just simply not going to do it because it won't get through the school board. Even though they understand the reasoning, it's just a deal breaker. Do you have any solutions to that or ideas?
Sure, Ken. There's solutions for everything, right? First of all, it may not be palatable by everyone, but this is how I would play that. Then we would need to carry a roof replacement reserve, or I should say, remove and reinstall solar reserve. We'll need to try and predict how far out that would be and have kind of a set aside for that. The trickle down effect of that is the school, in their all-in PPA rate will somehow be paying for that to come anyway, though we can mitigate their perception of risk. Very similar to, as most of you model the a 15-year replacement for inverters on on most systems, you know. So it would be just like that. We would just be assuming that we're going to have to pay to remove the system. It'll be down for, I don't know, 2 months, and then the system will be installed. And how much is that going to cost 10 years from now? So we'd have to work with you to put numbers that were realistic and put it into the budget. But it is solvable. I don't think that's greatest for the school, but I understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, and maybe it's something like you know, maybe you can find a solution where, okay, fine, we'll take that risk, or we'll replace or remove the panels up, you know, with these parameters this many times, but you're going to pay another, you know, penny or whatever it is per kilowatt hour. Is it okay if I ask one more quick question?
Sure.
My property tax question was, that kind of answered the question, but what I had, some feedback I got from a potential customer recently was on about a 2 megawatt CNI PPA, and the question was, you know, the solar array may not increase my property taxes, but now you have 15 acres of ground that I don't have access to anymore, but I'm paying property taxes. So it's not necessarily an increase that the solar array has caused, but just that now they're paying the same property taxes but have less land available. Does that make sense?
It does. So you're talking about a ground mount or a greenfield development. The nuts and bolts are they're the landlord. We would be a tenant in that scenario. And yes, they would have to typically pay their property taxes, whatever they were before solar. And it also gets written into leases. It can vary, and these are negotiation points, that if they get hit with any increase in that real estate property tax, that we cover that delta. And hopefully, whatever lease rate we pay to them, you know, more than compensates for them paying the property taxes. Could it be bifurcated? Sure, it could. It could get messy, but those are all individual deal negotiation points. You could say, you know, let's say the solar array is taking up 75% of the overall property, so then solar array owner has to pay 75% of those future property taxes. However, the landlord is the one that's still got the name on the property tax roll. Maybe they don't want to be putting the risk of someone else paying their property taxes. All worthy of discussion. It can be worked out. There's different ways. I usually advise keep it as simple as possible. Let them the landlord continue to pay his property taxes, and then, you know, get an appropriate lease rate that covers whatever, you know, he or she needs to get.
Got it. Thank you. It sounds like basically, I mean, with all this stuff, it's the host is going to pay for it one way or another. You can tell them you're going to give them $100,000 cash back, but it's going to be, you know, elevate their PPA rate. They're going to be paying for it one way or another.
True. In that scenario, I wasn't talking so much of behind the meter. I'm sorry. I was thinking more like a greenfield. But behind the meter, I would definitely keep it simple. If they're consuming that energy on site and they're paying property taxes now, I would want to keep them paying their standard property taxes. If it goes up, then that's typically on us, the difference that it goes up. And there's usually not a lease rate. And to hover on that, this is something that might be beneficial for others. If the host gets a lease payment, theoretically, that lease payment is taxable income. However, if they have a $0 lease or a license, which is what we use, and we put all of that money into the PPA rate, savings on their electric bill or what they pay into the PPA is not taxable to them. So the host benefits from getting better energy savings as opposed to getting a lease for the land or roof or what have you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
One thing I wanted to touch on real quick before we wrap up here is kind of our markets that we're most comfortable with, and other areas that we'd really like to get into. So, we're based out of Fort Collins, Colorado here. We do some projects here in Colorado, but I'd say actually the majority of the last couple of years have been California and Arizona. Those are two good markets for us that we're very familiar with. We've also been looking at a lot of projects in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. Those are also some pretty competitive areas where you get higher electric rates and some good incentives. And then, a few of the states that we'd really like to get into, Texas is one that I'd really like to get a project done, and I know can be a confusing market. A couple more of the Northeast states. Maine is an interesting one right now with the incentives there. And then we'd love to get some more projects out west here. The Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Washington, south of us here in Colorado and New Mexico. Those would all be projects we'd be really, really interested in. But in general, if a PPA or SSA is allowed in the state market you're looking at, then we'd love to take a look at the numbers and see if we can beat the offset rate. And it looks like Jeff has a question.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Just wondering what you folks do in terms of solar plus storage for your PPA rates, how that differs, and how you calculate your rate for storage inclusion.
Good one. And coming more often. We can include storage. We have several projects with storage in development right now. I will be 100% honest and say that we have not an operational project with solar and storage under a PPA yet, though we are anxious to do so. The bottom line is the capital expense for that storage would get rolled into the cost for the project, and then probably increase a PPA rate, which is a kilowatt hour rate. However, if you're a storage provider, we would hope that you can help us and help the customer understand any demand savings that they should see from the storage and or benefits of being resilient. What's the dollar value of that? And that defends the PPA rate that we would offer.
In certain states, thank you for that clarity. In certain states, are you seeing additional benefits, or I should say services that the storage can provide with the prevailing utility, like black start, demand response programs, or grid frequency balancing, things of that nature? Are you seeing there being significant enough value to incorporate the prevailing utility where those programs are applicable?
Personally, I'm going to say not yet. And maybe it's because of the scale we're generally working in, the DG on-site stuff. On a larger scale, I think the answer is yes, though I'm no longer an expert in that. I think it's coming. I think there'll be more of that to come. But what we more commonly see is the utility says, under their interconnection rules, the parameters of the inverters need to be X, Y, and Z. You meet them, you get to interconnect. And there's not as much dialogue of, if we can offer other benefits, will they pay us for them? Only on the big stuff, though I do think it's coming. Now, maybe an offshoot of that question, and the answer is, back to that demand savings. For the customer, there should be always some other benefits. For the utility, I'm not seeing much on our scale.
And kind of to piggyback off of that question, I have also seen some projects where they're doing, energy conservation and try to wrap that into the PPA, which we've looked at a number of those projects. They include LED lighting or generators or HVAC work. Again, similar to storage, it likely will increase that starting PPA rate because there's generally no revenue being generated from those components. But, in some markets, especially the Northeast, especially out in California, you can wrap those into a PPA and the numbers will still pencil. So if you do have a project like that in your hands, yeah, I don't feel like it wouldn't work for a PPA just right off the bat.
Okay. I have another question regarding monitoring and OM. You said that you folks usually use also energy. Are you married to that tech, or are there other systems that you would use or are open to, other platforms that could be not necessarily better, but an alternative that you would consider? And as a second part to that, in how many cases, or by what parameters would you need to have monitoring? Is it at a certain size or what have you?
I'll take that one, Hunter. I'm going to answer in a way not to offend anyone. Yes, we're married to Also Energy. I don't always love it, but if you think about it this way, if we're monitoring, I don't know, 50 something, some odd systems, we need them all to be on the same platform. Our asset manager can't be bouncing around and logging into this one, that one, so we need them to be uniform. Also, the majority of our investors and tax equity providers also like Also Energy. For better or worse, they've dominated the market, bought up a number of other companies, so they're the end game platform. However, can we figure out something? We need monitoring on every system, and it needs to be revenue grade on every system, because that's how we're able to bill the customer. It's the only way to do it. We can sometimes work with inverter direct monitoring if it's revenue grade, which might be a very cost-effective upgrade, or a card or a chip inserted. And then that gets ported over to the Also Energy platform. That can still work sometimes. When there's a small system, call it 100 or 150 kilowatts, I realize neither one of us wants to burden that system with whatever, $15,000 of monitoring costs if we don't have to. We'll talk through it. If we know the technology we're working with, maybe we can figure something out. But in the end, we've got to be able to see it and view it on Also Energy.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Nick, it looks like we are at time.
That's it. 12:30. Again, I'll just close by saying thank you, everyone, for being here. Hopefully you have my and Hunter's contact info, if not Jenna's too. Reach out to us anytime. We're here to support you. We want to help you win and build more commercial deals, because we want to help you support and finance those. And with that, I'll thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all. Have a good one.
Appreciate it.